is Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 25 years of experience. Together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back, Henry, and today we have a special guest all the way from New York City, an old friend of mine. His name is Richard Gant. He's a professor of marketing and strategy at New York University, and he's also the CEO and Chief Experiential Officer of his own ad agency, Gant Group. He was a great contributor to my book, How to Write a Single-Minded Proposition, so I consider him an old friend. Let's listen in on this great conversation we had with Professor Richard Gant. Here we go. All right, Henry, we're back for another episode, and I'm delighted to welcome and introduce, I guess I can say, an old friend. This is Richard Gant, who is the president and CEO of Gant Group, and I know him through his teaching at New York University, where he's taught a class on creative strategy. And he helped me out a number of years ago when I was writing my second book on how to write the single-minded proposition. He gave me a great interview, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I just wanted to say that, you know, Richard and I have been threatening to get together for dinner, and just, you know, COVID got in the way and life got in the way, and my travel to New York never kind of coordinated, so we haven't been able to do it. And here now, for the first time, or at least the first time in a long time, we're seeing each other virtually, which is kind of the way of the world today. But we're really glad, Richard, that you can join us. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you're doing, what's going on in your world, and welcome to the Brief Brothers.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you. Great to see you, Howard, and great to meet you, Henry. Thank you guys for having me join you today. This is a treat, absolutely. As you said, Howard, I am president and CEO, Chief Experience Officer of the Gant Group. Gant is a sports entertainment and events and media marketing agency. Our focus is on sports entertainment and event marketing, but we do other things in marketing as well. Represent athletes, basically helping brands communicate their promotional and selling message through sports, entertainment, and events. And then also, an offshoot, I teach, going on to the 24th year, I can't believe it, at New York University here in New York, where I teach Campaign 1 Strategy and Execution in the graduate MS in Integrated Marketing Communications program. Competitive strategy in that program, and then in the Tisch School of Hospitality 2 years ago, we started a event management, MS in event management, and I teach one of the entry classes, and that's called Event Marketing Strategies, which I'm really happy about because I get to go into class and talk about what I just did an hour ago, you know, or a brand I just talked to, and this is how we did it, and this is our strategy, and so forth. So those things are great.
All right. Well, and, you know, it's almost hard to know where to start, but I'm going to start with where you and I kind of got together, and that was when I called you. Was it 4 years ago now? Something like that. I think I published the Single-Minded Proposition book, and it's this one here, How to Write a Single-Minded Proposition. I published that, I forget how many years ago. And I had interviews with a lot of folks all around the country and around the world. And I asked them, it's like, what is this thing called the single-minded proposition? How do we write this? What are your thoughts on it? And it was fascinating to hear so many people, including Henry. I picked on Henry, you know, and picked his brain a lot. And he's got quotes in this book too. And what I discovered was, no matter what level of experience you have in writing a brief or writing a single-minded proposition, it still gives people headaches. It's a challenge, and it's something that people are constantly struggling with, and rightfully so, because this thing called the single-minded proposition can be a real obstacle. And as I said to you before we started recording, and I've said this to you even before that, and Henry, you're going to have to just maybe cover your ears. Richard has my favorite quote in all the chapters on how to write a single-minded proposition. And let me share it with you. It's brilliant, because now the other thing you got to know about Richard is that he's he's a trumpeter, and he's got a degree in music. So this guy knows how to, you know, as I said to him before, I make noise on the trumpet. I used to play trumpet too. I make noise, he makes music. So he's great. He used Miles Davis as an example to help us understand the single-minded proposition. He wrote, Miles Davis said that the essence of making music is to take one note and make it do the work of 10. That's a description of a good single-minded proposition. And I still love that. And I get what it means, but I'd like to hear you kind of expand on that. What Miles Davis changed music, changed jazz as we know it, right?
Yeah.
By the way he focused on the way he made music. So how did you come to Miles Davis as a way to explain the single-minded proposition?
Well, I mean, when he said that, and I started listening, I mean, I was listening to him before that, but he said that, and there's actually one song in particular that now I play for my students when I tell them that. 'Cause I quote this, we use the book in class, right? It's a requirement in two of my classes. So when they come to that, I say, okay, and I play the song for them. And the song is Stella by Starlight. And it's a live recorded at Carnegie Hall. And they played it. It was right after, interestingly enough, it was right after Kennedy's assassination. And they asked them later, the music on it's a 2-album set. One is all ballads, the other one is fast and so forth. But the ballad side, My Funny Valentine, Stella by Starlight, and Stella by Starlight in particular, but My Funny Valentine too. The music is really melancholy. They asked Miles about it later. He said, well, the whole feeling when Kennedy was assassinated, people were just feeling melancholy. But there's more than one note that he plays in there that, man, it is just, you don't have to do anything after that, right? There's nothing left after that one note. It says so much in that one note, the feeling, right? And that's where we're talking about single-minded proposition, because if you can get that, and I tell them now it's not easy. There's only one Miles Davis. If you can do that and you can translate that into writing a single-minded proposition, at least that's how you should think about it, right?
We've used the metaphor of musicians here on the podcast before, because I think for a lot of people that are charged with writing creative briefs, even for strategists like me, I'm a full-time strategist, writing a brief is only a very small part of what we do on a day-to-day basis, and you don't get a ton of practice.
Right.
But it's the most important part of what a lot of us do. And it's certainly the most important part in terms of developing new advertising for a lot of us. And so the practice makes perfect kind of ethos of musicians of, you just have to keep doing it. And my refrain, and I'm sure that our couple of dozen subscribers are tired of me hearing me say it, is that, brief writing is writing. And in order to get good at it, you have to do a lot of writing, and so you have to practice writing. And I think that writing single-minded propositions in a brief is that much more. It's like, to your point, it's like the keynote on which the whole composition rests. And
right.
if you get that right, then everything else becomes clearer. And I often urge, when writing a creative brief, to sometimes you don't land on that single-minded proposition initially. Sometimes you come in with the idea for a single-minded proposition, but you should always go back and make it an iterative process, because when you do and you are happy with your single-minded proposition, then everything else should build up to and support that single-minded proposition. And it's a good filter for getting rid of the stuff that has no bearing on the single-minded proposition. You might have started out with a bunch of data or things that you thought were going to be relevant, but then when you got down to it and say, you know what, that's not important here. I only want to include the stuff that's important to this single-minded proposition. So I love the metaphor of the musician.
Yeah, I agree with you too. You can start writing. You got to do a lot of writing, and you're writing. Like writing music, the same thing. You're writing. And then I tell them also, okay, you may spend an hour trying to write. It's not working. Get up and go somewhere. Put it away. And then come back. I do that sometimes I'll pick up my trumpet. It just ain't working. Right? It's just not happening. Ain't nothing coming out of there. Okay, that's it. This session is over. Go away for an hour. either go away for the whole day and come back, and then put it together.
It's true. It's true for creatives as well. We were talking with Cameron Day just on the last show, and he was basically saying the same thing. Something he'll read the brief and then go to bed with the notebook next to on his nightstand, because you just have to stop actively thinking about something, and that's usually how solution to these types of problems are generated, by the subconscious, when you're not actively thinking about it consciously.
That's
So,
absolutely right.
so Richard, this is kind of interesting. When you play that song by Miles Davis and you talk about the single-minded proposition, have you completely intimidated your students with all that, or does that really open their eyes to how to write a better proposition?
Some of them, I mean, it's really interesting because some of them never really heard jazz or anything like that before. Got a lot of students from Asia, or the younger students say, "Well, they Stella by Starlight in 1964 or whatever it was." I mean, what is this music? But some of them, they get it because I guess they see me. I'm like, when we're listening to it, and then he hits that note, I'm like, oh, I not tense up, but it goes through me. And some of them get it. They get it. But I said, look, take a piece of music that you like, an artist that you really like, and a singer or a guitarist, same thing. It could be that one note that you really think that moves, something that really moves you, right? And then take that. That's the feeling you want to translate into that single-minded proposition.
So what is I want to move into talking about how you perceive students today, because you said you've been teaching for 24, 25 years now.
Yeah.
Have you seen a change? How has the student who wants to go into strategy or creative at NYU in the classes that you've been teaching, how have they evolved and changed over the years? Well, let me put this in context. One of the questions that I ask when I talk to students is, and Henry and I have talked about this, advertising is about selling stuff. How comfortable are you, young man and young woman, with selling widgets? Do you call yourself a capitalist, or do you want to go out and save the world? So if you're not comfortable with selling toilet paper and detergent and widgets, maybe advertising isn't for you. So how have the students that have come through your classroom changed over the years, from what you can tell?
It's interesting. I think I'm kind of seeing a lot of them want to just get to it. They want to be further along than they are. They want to, do things that they don't want to start somewhere and go. Like you said, mentioned something about sales, right? Marketing is sales. At the end of the day, products and services. Companies want to sell their products and services, so you need to think about that. You can't go in. I'm a marketer. I don't want to do sales. I think I see a lot of that, right? Just Tuesday, I posed a question about after the pandemic, what's work going to look like? What's next in work? How's it going to look after the pandemic? Are you going to stay home? Are you going to go back to the office? They're all like, oh, we're going to be online and all this kind of stuff. So what I did then is I played a old commercial. You guys probably remember this commercial. So United Airlines commercial, actually. And the guy comes in, he says, hey, I just got a call from a client that fired us today. And they're like, and then the woman comes and gives them a bunch of tickets, and he starts handing them out. So I want everybody to go visit your clients, right? And they ask him, where you going? I'm going to go back and talk to that client that fired us today, because we are doing everything on Zoom and digital. And the commercials talk about the fax and all that, telephone and fax, and you're not getting in front of anybody. I think the communication, and to answer your question, the communication level of the students today is lacking where it was yesterday. There's a lot of this. They're texting and they're not talking. And I think that's hurting marketing, it's hurting advertising. And so now maybe I'm so old that the new people, the new kids, the new people on the block, that's how they'll communicate. I don't think so, though.
No, I agree with you.
I think that there's something in us talking, and certainly getting in front of each other too, live, that cannot ever go away.
I think Henry and I, we've heard this from other guests who say, yeah, the young kids today just want to jump in and do a major campaign. They don't want to learn they don't necessarily want to learn the nuts and bolts and do the really heavy lifting that's required to learn the craft.
Right.
We were talking before about being good writers. Art directors need to understand what artistic style is. How do you use color? How do you use typeface? Things like that.
Yeah,
I
agree. I think that our industry was notorious for having very low entry level salaries and working people to death, particularly in those first couple of years when you're basically a glorified intern, right? Like you really can't be trusted to do anything. You're given menial tasks, and hopefully if you stick around long enough, things will start rubbing off on you. And I think just as a society, we're more impatient. And so it's no surprise that the young adults are more impatient. So yeah, I think the other interesting thing you talked about is like, where's work going? And I think that for a time we can do this, virtual, collaboration and stuff like that. But long term, I don't know how viable that is. And the reason is when we're trying to solve complex problems, a lot of times those solutions come at the 11th hour when you're in the office on your 10th cup of coffee. You got a deadline. It's 3 a.m. You have a 8 o'clock in the morning deadline. And that's where it happens. And I don't know that it happens on a Zoom call where there's so many distractions. Your dog is barking. You got to change a diaper, whatever it is. I don't know that long term. I think the companies that prioritize being together at least part of the time are going to do better than the ones that are strictly virtual and aren't together at all.
Yeah, and one of the things we were talking about too is, an example. I was like talking about Bloomingdale's. People are buying a lot of things online today, including me. But there's some things I'm not going to buy online. I want to go there and see. So I said, what we have to do, we're in the marketing business, especially in the event marketing side, we had to create new experiences when you go into the store. So Bloomingdale's is totally turned around. They'll invite you to come in. Maybe the new Michael Kors bag is in, and they invite you to come in. You walk into the store, and they greet you with some champagne. Maybe they sit you down. There's a fashion show going on. This could be at lunchtime, right? And you go over there during lunch, and this is happening during lunch. Maybe there's champagne, but this is something that's happening. So it's an experience that's created, and then you do your shopping there. Not that you're just online. I said, if the people who can do that and create that sort of thing, they're going to sell. They're going to sell goods and services because people want to be with people. I know I do.
I agree. Two thoughts. One is I don't think brick and mortar is ever going to be in danger of going extinct. I think brick and mortar is in a phase of evolution and needs to evolve to survive. And I agree. And I think the retailers that haven't survived are the ones that failed to evolve. And the example that I like to give, and I was sad when it happened, was Toys R Us. So Toys R Us, toy retailer specialists, they closed their doors nationwide. And the reason is because they weren't offering anything different than what you could get at Target or Walmart. It's just the same toys at a higher markup. So imagine if Toys R Us still existed today, but if it was a place where you had high end like drones and model trains and things that you're never going to get at Target or at where the people are experts at these particular hobbies and toys and types of toys of a more high end and experience based type of retail. There's no reason why they couldn't be around still today. So I think there is an evolution. I think obviously we're going to lose some retail players, but some are going to get stronger. I've seen it going the other way, by the way. Geico is an insurance giant, right? That basically revolutionized insurance by going direct to consumer, right? Before you had this agent model. But even Geico realized that the agent model the direct to consumer model only takes them so far. So now I don't know if you're aware, if people are aware of this, but in almost every major city, there are Geico agents now that you can go to a storefront like the way you used to in the old days. So I think there's always going to be some consumers that prefer that press the flesh, have the relationship experience, as opposed to making a phone call or doing it online. I mean, for certain things, I certainly prefer online, and for other things, I certainly
Right.
prefer in person. So
Exactly. I'll give you guys another example real quick. It's interesting. So I don't know if you last time you were in New York, but on 6th Avenue, Avenue of the Americas, between 42nd and 41st Street, right across from Bryant Park, there's a Whole Foods store there. Now, 10 years ago, nobody would ever conceive a supermarket in Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan. It just wouldn't. Now, check this out. You walk in there, it's way more than a grocery store or supermarket. Right. They got a bar in there. You go upstairs, there's a bar. You can sit at the bar, have a drink, and you go get your lunch and go across to Bryant Park. And one of the things I talk to my students about this, one thing that's really interesting is that, okay, you got all these office buildings around there. So people leave work, they go into Whole Foods, they can go shopping and get whatever they need for dinner, right? Jump on the train, go home, and fix up whatever they need to do. Otherwise, used to be, you would leave work, get on the train, go home. Oh, God, I don't have anything in the refrigerator. I got to go back out to the supermarket. That's been taken away. You can do that on your way home now. I said, that little thing there, I said, that's strategy. That was the strategy. That wasn't something that's out of the blue. They thought about that.
Right? It also speaks to adapting your business model to given market situation, right? Like you have a very, for a lot of Whole Foods trade areas, I would imagine it's normal suburban. But what do you do when you have a large built up city with a huge population density and a lot of people commuting in and out? That's not the norm for a lot of us, for most of us right. in the country. So having that ability to adapt your concept to
right.
the realities of the market. We've seen that here in South Florida and in the big Hispanic markets, right, where we've seen retailers adopt a different product selection to cater to the specific audiences that congregate around those particular stores. And we have a Public Sabor, which is a concept that they launched. It's a grocery store that launched this Hispanic concept. CVS also has a Hispanic concept here. So I agree. It is definitely strategy.
We got to remember that Whole Foods, I think the headquarters of Whole Foods is here in my town of Austin. So, and when I lived in New York, long before I knew you, actually I lived in Jersey City 11 years ago now, 2011 to 2012. So it's like been 10 years. There was a Whole Foods in Soho, and I could jump on the path, cross the and get at the get out at the World Trade Center and walk up just a few blocks. And I would hang out there and grade. I was teaching at the time. Grade papers in the cafeteria. It was kind of loud, but but you could. They had a place there to do it.
Rushing you out of the store or anything like that. It's like they're creating experiences within these places to target the new normal or a different normal. And that's where you are.
I was talking to a creative strategy class earlier this week, which it's a regular that it's the University of Minnesota's Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communications, and I know the instructor, Mark Jensen, there. He used to work at Campbell Methune in Minneapolis, and I also worked at Campbell Methune as a freelancer a long time ago. And I get questions from the students, and one of the questions they asked me was, how has the internet changed creative briefs? And so I want to ask you, you also do experiential marketing. Has the internet, and I had an answer for this, my own answer, and my answer was a creative brief is a creative brief. it doesn't. It's not like there's no such thing as a TV creative brief or a outdoor creative brief or a print creative brief or a website creative brief. It's a brief, right? And there might be little extra things you'd ask on some of those specifics, but it's just a creative brief. You're not asking for tactics, right? What about experiential marketing for you? Has the internet had an impact on how you write a brief?
No, a brief is a brief. It's a brief. You just said it. The only thing is that almost everything we do today has a social media overlay. So in the channels that you're using, what channels are you using at the bottom of the brief? Well, social media, that's going to be one of the channels. Now, it could be the only channel. That's the only thing different. You may write a brief and say, you're not doing any television, you're not doing it because, that's only because you obviously you know this, you talk to your market where they are. And today, some people are just on mobile or digital, not generally, but you can focus just there. You can focus a message right there. There's just social media as a channel.
Yeah.
So
Other than that, the brief is still the same.
So I would say I don't think it changes. I think the internet has changed the way I write briefs because suddenly I have access to a lot more information that can help me generate thinking about the brief. I can go and see what people are saying in real time about the brand on Twitter. I can go into Facebook groups and be a fly on the wall and hear what people are saying about the new Bronco or whatever is the product that I'm advertising. I also have access to a lot of data and information that was so I think the thing I would caution students against is just doing your research on the internet. Howard and I talk about all the time is like, go out if your client is a retailer, go to their stores and see how people interact at their
Thank
stores.
you.
Buy
Please
the
tell my
product.
students that.
buy the product. The analogy I taught a course at the Miami Ad School, and the assignment they asked me to write a brief for the creative students, and the brief that I wrote was for Advance Auto Parts, which is an auto parts retailer. Not the greatest, not the one with the biggest share, but a major one. And when I evaluated the work, I asked the students, how many of you went to one of these stores? And of the 20 teams that produced work, only one team had gone to the store to see what was going on in the store. And I said, guys, you're doing this for credit for school. I gave you a brief, and I made sure that there were 2 stores from this brand within walking distance of your school. So there's no excuse. Like, even if you didn't have a car, within a 1.5 miles, there were 2 of these stores. So I do think it's a great help to writing a brief. You can get a lot of information that you wouldn't normally have access to before. And you can test your hypotheses and like that. But I think the danger there is just relying completely on what you can do at the end of a keyboard, as opposed to going out and talking to people and seeing it for yourself.
Really good point. Really good point.
Goes to what we were talking about. They want everything. Some of the younger students, it's kind of like the shortcut. Like you said, they're looking for shortcuts, and they're no shortcuts. I tell them, we did last semester, we did alcohol brands, right, for campaign 1. We had Suntory, Uncle Nearest, which is a whiskey, with the Balvenie. What else did we do? Balvenie, one Guaozhou 1573, which is out of China, and one more that I can't think of the top of my head. So same thing. Henry, I asked, anybody call Uncle Nearest? Say, I'm a graduate student at NYU, and we're working on a campaign for Uncle Nearest, and I asked them questions. No. Like, why not? They'd be more than happy to talk to you. Not only that, as you're looking for internships later, because can I send you this, what we worked on, so you can see it?
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, now with LinkedIn, you could reach out to people directly, right? And say,
Yeah,
hey, I'm a student. Like, eh, sure, some people aren't going to respond, and some
right.
people are going to say, no, I can. It's but you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help a student out. You know, when I get inquiries from students, I always answer them, or I try to. Uh, in fact, one day I was going through my inbox and I saw an old message. I had never seen it before. It was old, and it was a student reaching out for some help on something. And I wrote back and said, I feel really bad. I just saw this now. I hope that you got what you needed from somebody else. And they're like, oh, yeah, thanks for responding anyway. You know, we're all human, and we all, but you'd be surprised how many people out there will be willing to help you if you
You're
just
surprised.
ask.
That's right.
And the truth is, Richard, there are folks who are been out there for 5 or 10 years, marketers who have, a fair amount of experience, who still have this, I'm trying to find the shortest route between point A and B. I've done training. I'm Richard, and Henry's heard me talk about this. I've done training. I can't name the brand because they're part of the ANA, and I don't want to, embarrass anybody. But I've done training where I'd be sitting in the room. We were talking about who is the target audience, who is our customer, and we're sitting literally in the midst of the place where the customers are roaming around, and their offices are smack dab in the middle. And I stopped and I said, "Does anybody bother to go outside and just walk around? And you don't have to talk to anybody, but just look at what they're doing." And they looked at me like I just landed from Mars, right? We can do that?
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course you can.
right. And because we get stuck in our little cocoons called the office, and now because of COVID, or at least for most of us because of COVID, we're still stuck at home. So getting
Right.
out into the real world is tougher, and I get that, but it's not impossible. And the internet does
No,
provide this. So, Henry's point about the internet, it hasn't really changed the brief itself, but it's certainly helped us in answering questions for the brief. And I hadn't thought about that. That's a really good point.
And
I hadn't
short
either, Henry. Thank you for saying that, Henry, because you're absolutely, what you just said is you're absolutely right. You could do a lot more research there, absolutely. A whole lot
shortcut
more.
Speaking of shortcuts, I think that this is again another recurring theme that we have is, raising the importance of the brief, because the brief has a tendency, because it's a form with questions and blank spots to answer questions. There's a tendency to regard it as a form I have to fill out. It's something I need to, between me and what I need to get to is this form. So I'm just going to fill out the form. And you need to stop thinking of it as a form and think of it as a tool. This is a tool that is going to get us the the better that I use this tool, the better the end work is going to be. And I think that that's a big challenge. That's something that I try to impress to anybody that I teach a workshop to or something like that is don't think of this as homework that you need to just fill out questions, answer questions and get by, because the quality of the work could often depend on the quality of the work that you put into answering those questions and not looking at it as a form. That would be a shortcut, right? Is, oh, I just need to, bullet point out who the target is. Oh, their age 18 to 54. Like that means anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. In talking about creative briefs and even in event marketing, experiential marketing, I'll give you guys an example. Tomorrow I'll have session 2. So tomorrow we're going to go into the creative strategy. First session in event marketing, I talked to them about marketing. I said, you're in event marketing. It's not about weddings. It's not about putting up banners. It's not about all that. It's about the marketing part of it first, then the event part of it. There's a strategy behind event marketing now that you have to know. So we do that background, and then tomorrow we'll go into creative strategy. But we do the creative brief. I give them a brand, and I have them do a creative brief. I want them to understand that, and I think the first day in class, I do tell them that I want you to wear 2 hats: the brand side and the agency side. So that's my background. I've worked brands, and now I work agency. I have an agency, but I worked for Anheuser-Busch before before I started this particular agency. So I want you to work both sides. So then we do the creative brief. They're going to start on their creative briefs tomorrow, so they can understand what that's all about, writing it, what it's all about, how to do it. The next thing we do is to step into the event marketing part of it. I want them to have that background. And then we do what we call a proposal brief. Now, the proposal brief is more about what the brand is going to do, but it's starting from the creative brief. The creative brief, this is the brand, they started on this is their campaign. Okay, you may not get a chance to see that as an event marketer, but if you go back and you see what this brand is doing, what their new campaign is, you better believe there's a creative brief in there somewhere. The fact that you know how to do it, you can decipher it better in your head. You know what the brand is doing, you can talk their language, then you can talk about why they should use event marketing or experiential marketing as a strategy.
That's an important point, is decoding the brand's existing work, right? And we use that as a tool in teaching all the time, that retrofitting, creating a brief where none exists for work that already exists, to decipher what is this brand about, who are they talking to, what are the pain points that they're addressing. And to your point, then event becomes another tool in the marketing toolbox, but because you went upstream one step, now you know where that event idea is going to fit in within all of the other things that they're doing.
Absolutely. And that's the only way they're going to get involved. They want to know that you understand the brand.
So what I was going to ask you, Richard, is what are some of the obstacles that you see students stumbling over as they're drafting a first draft of a brief? Where do they get stuck?
Oh, God. Where don't they get stuck?
Does something stand out?
Creativity, I think. It's really interesting. It's because if I let them choose, if I let them choose their own brand, which I don't let them do anymore, they choose something really easy. It's always fashion or Nike or something like that. I haven't come up with something totally different. That's why I did alcohol brands, because none of them had never done that before. So I may do that again this semester. Here's Uncle Near's alcohol. Here's Suntory. Write a creative brief for them. And they usually stumble over the research part that Henry was talking about, going back and really learning about the brand and what the brand is all about. They want to go right in, and that's that thing. Mm-hmm. They don't want to do any research, right?
Yeah.
Or very little research, I should say.
It's interesting you mentioned alcohol brands, because I think one of the benefits of teaching using alcohol brands is, one, they're largely all about brand, right? Like you mentioned some high quality whiskeys. They have different taste profiles, but they're all really high. And so you get into like single malts, like the Balvenie that you mentioned, right?
Right.
There's no functional differentiation between, really good 12-year-old single malt scotches. They might have some slight, but the branding is completely different, and the emotions that they're trying. So I love spirits advertising, because it's all branding, right? And the other thing is that a lot of these brands have long histories, right? So there is a wealth of information you can research. I had the opportunity to work on Johnny Walker for a few years. I mean, what an incredible brand with an incredible founder and history. And it's all out there for you to find if you're curious enough to find it. And you can bet your sweet bippy that the people that are responsible for Johnny Walker care about that history, and they're not going to turn over their advertising to somebody who just thinks they're going to come in with something brand new without any relation to what has come before.
Well, Henry, We've just dated ourselves with that reference. Was that from the 1960s? What was that show with Rowan and Martin?
Don't be a lummox. Don't be a lummox, Howard.
Bet your sweet bippy. That's straight out of Laughing. My goodness.
I knew right away what he was talking about. I love it.
We've dated ourselves. Well, I was thinking, Richard, one of the things that I hear a lot when I see, and I teach workshops for junior and mid-level marketers, people who've been out of school for a while, they've been in the business for a while. And for example, when they try to fill out the answer to the question, what is the objective? What is our communication objective? Why are we doing advertising? The go-to answer is we need to build awareness. Like, well, every campaign is about building awareness, but that's like, okay, that's first draft language. That's the first thing. If you actually start to examine what the problem is, building awareness may not really be the most important objective. It's kind of like I say all the time, I know what the marketing objective of every product and every service is from now until the end of time. It's sell more. And creatives know that. No one is ever going to say to me, Howard, our product is selling way too fast. We need to cool things off. That's just not going to be an assignment. So I know the marketing objective for every product. Well, the communication objective is probably going to be for every product. We need to build awareness. But that's kind of like a kindergartner's answer.
Right. You mentioned the challenge. What's the challenge? And I'm glad you said that, because I, as an agency, one of the first things I do in the morning, and I do all day, is I get up and I do my research. I read advertising age, brand week, blah, 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 all of them. I want to find out what the brands are saying, what their challenges are. So when I call them up, I just read in Advertising Age that you had this problem. We have a solution for your challenge. So I try to tell the students when they're getting ready to write, what is the challenge? I may give it to them and say, here's the challenge. And generally I do. You want to Guangzhou 1573. This Guangzhou is a Baiju. You probably know Baiju is a very, very old alcohol from China. I mean, way back, hundreds, 300, 400, 500, 600 years old. That's how long this has been around. I first saw the brand name at Australian Open a couple of years ago. I was like, what is that? So I went in and I found out, oh, okay, they're communicating with in Australia. So I'll give them a challenge. Look at the challenge being Guangzhou 1573 into America. So here's your challenge. It's not here. They're not selling it here. So here's your challenge. So I usually give it to them because they're not thinking that long. That's one of the challenges I have, to get them to think deeper. And that is a challenge for me, even for me, because it's like, I know that their graduate students is what surprises me, that the depth of their involvement in what they want to do and how they're going to go about it is not as far along as I think it should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's one thing, and I think that's a challenge in any field that isn't like, accounting or law or things like that are highly specialized, right? You're a student, but you don't really know what it's like until you get into the real world, and you have to live and breathe that brand or that company 24/7. But I agree with Howard. Awareness is like a fallback thing that people say, oh, we need to generate awareness. In reality, I've had so many instances where awareness isn't a problem. 95% of the public is aware of the brand. That's not the problem. The problem is maybe consideration. People are aware but not considering the brand, because then the question is, why aren't they considering it? Is it a quality issue? Is it a price perception issue? Is it a history maybe where you had bad quality at one point, but now it's better? So diagnosing those actual communication problems is difficult, and it does take time, but you have to be imaginative. You can't just go to the fallback of awareness. Now, the case of the Chinese spirit that you're talking about, for sure, probably not a lot of people are aware. But I think even there, it goes beyond awareness. Like, I want you to be aware that there's a Chinese spirit and this is what it's called. But okay, so what? Like, why should I care? Why am I going to like it if I'm, so I think you have to go a little bit deeper. Like, it's kind of staying in the alcoholic beverage. One of the top campaigns of our time is the most interesting man in the world. And if you see the work, the brief is right there. He says, I don't always drink beer. So who's your target audience? Well, your target audience is people that have a broad repertoire of drinking occasions and have different top choices. And so that same person who's going to drink the Dos Equis might on another occasion drink a whiskey. On another occasion might drink a clear spirit. So they're telling you right there, it's like saying, okay, this is a sophisticated person that has different brands that they choose within different drinking occasions. So he says, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, and then there's the whole part about, the sophistication that he has. So all of a sudden it's like, yeah, this is a Mexican beer, but it's a very sophisticated beer for people that want an imported beer. So I think there's a lot to learn, again, from kind of reverse engineering some of the work that we see, and really understanding for them, it wasn't about awareness. People were aware of Dos Equis. They just didn't have a reason to want to drink it. Now they had a reason to want to drink it because it was kind of seen as a cut above within the beer category.
Mm-hmm.
So, Richard, have you heard, or actually I'll ask Henry this too, have you heard of a podcast called Tagline?
I have not.
It's brand new, and I think I sent Henry, I sent you a link to one. It's brand new. It's put together by Muse, by Clio, and the first episode was about the backstory for how the most interesting man in the world came about. And they've done episodes about Motel 6, the Force for Volkswagen, Johnny Walker. This is the first season. I highly recommend it if you want to know how a campaign evolved, where it started, the struggles that they had selling it to the client, the fallbacks, what happened, how it happened. It's a great, basically 1 hour documentary in a podcast form to do a deep dive on these ad campaigns.
I'll download it this afternoon.
Yeah, Tagline. It's really good. But I wanted to ask you, Richard, you've been teaching now like for 24 years. You've got to have some really proud moments where your students have gone on to some good things, some great things. Share some of those stories with us.
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, they're it's interesting, and I don't get them anymore. The Brazilians. I used to get a lot of Brazilians, and I love Brazil, as you already probably know. But they have went on. I mean, there's a couple of them down there that have some really great companies down there. One, an experiential marketing company. He's changed the name a couple of times, but I mean, this guy is like really, really doing it down there now. And then another student down there. He's in Sao Paulo. The one guy's in Rio, the other in Sao Paulo, and he has he's doing basketball now in Brazil, and he started with an agency, and very successful. So that's Brazil, and the clothing lines down there. There's some women in some clothing lines there. Africa. A student from Nigeria. He had a big festival over there called the Giddy Festival, huge festival, lots of sponsors and all that. He's now like a VP at Universal Music Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, he's doing that. This is just in a couple of years. About 4 years ago, he was here, and now he's doing that.
I've forgotten the name of the guy who was in the class that I talked to. He held up a copy of my book, and then we connected on LinkedIn, and he's gone on to get some jobs. But I've forgotten his name. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I can't call his name right now, but I know exactly who you're speaking of. Absolutely. Yeah. He's doing good. He's actually, I think, here in New York of all places.
I think so.
But he's doing really good. He's doing really good as well. In China, I've got a lot of students out of China recently, and a couple of them are doing really good. They're over in Beijing and Shanghai, and they're doing well. But what I really like about it is I have students from all over the globe, and we have a Facebook page, and alumni page, and I tell the students, so once you graduate, once you leave my class, you get in. There are people all over the world where you can go in here and connect with them. They don't. Yeah. they drives me nuts.
Yeah.
It's like we have some people who they're students from 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They're now executive. You're looking for a job in that city. You're a graduate of the program. You're one of Professor Gant's students. Call them.
If anything, you have already like a common ground to say, hey, I saw that you're in
Yeah.
Professor Gant's Facebook group. I just graduated and blah blah. And so yeah, I mean, using that common ground to establish a relationship
Yeah.
is something.
You know what? Guys, one of the things I think is, and this, I have more foreign students than anything else, which is interesting because I think the foreign students are not, they're not as savvy like with LinkedIn and some of these other things as the students in the United States are. Which
Interesting.
Maybe not as comfortable with like networking, like hardcore networking,
right.
to self-promote.
Exactly. I told them, I said, one first thing I said, how many of you on LinkedIn? Raise your hand. Only 2 of you. I said, well, by the end of the day or the end of the week, you all should be on LinkedIn, and I should have 25 requests to connect. And
well, I think that's not, I think it's true as well with some American students. I've taught at community college when I was in LA. And of course I do these workshops, and I say to the students, whether they're in my workshops, whether they're in, college students, I'm happy to write a letter of recommendation for you, but don't come up to me at the end of the semester and for the first time introduce yourself and then ask me for a letter of recommendation. I don't know who you are.
Exactly.
You have to reach out and come and visit me during my office hours, or connect with me on an email, have me invite me to a cup of coffee, and let me get to know you beyond what I'm seeing when you hand in a paper. And I don't care where you're from, Americans, immigrants. I think they're just, young people are not quite as familiar with how to do that. At least that's been my experience. But Henry teaches, and I teach, and you teach, and there's nothing that gives me more joy, and I think you guys would agree, than after a student has left and you've forgotten who that person is, and you get an email and you say, okay, I recognize the name, I can't quite put a face to it. And that person, man or woman, says, I remember your class. I now am a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer. And it's because I took your class that I became a writer. And I went back to my records, and that person got a C in my class. I said, what the heck? I said something right, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah, that does make me, that's why we do this stuff, don't we?
It is. It is.
7 interns actually 7 of my students were interned with my agency last year.
Wow.
7 of them. Yeah. I believe, I love my students. I want to help them out. I tell them, the reason I'm here for you. You're not here for me. And, I want to make you succeed. You're not going to walk out of here and not be successful. So that's not in my DNA. I'm not going to let you do that.
Right.
It's a great philosophy.
Yeah. And I think it's a great place to end. Richard, it's been great seeing you. It's been quite a long time since I talked to your class, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
I'm going to set it up.
And thank you for agreeing to be
an invite too.
Okay. Thank you for being part of the Brief Brothers. We really enjoyed having you on. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.